A wooden bench, scarred, gouged, splintered by years of use. A strip of leather lies across it, stiff and dull. A hammer rises, falls, rises again. Each strike lands with purpose, not graceful, not refined, just steady, honest, loud. This is where the story begins. Not in a pulpit, not in a packed hall, not before crowds or choirs or banners. It begins in a shoe store. The air smells of leather and sweat. Dust clings to everything. Hands work fast because time costs money, and money is always short. The man at the bench does not look important. No polish, no pedigree, no reason anyone would stop and listen. He is young. He is restless. He is unknown. And nothing about him suggests the scale of what is coming. This is mid-19th century America in the small, frigid town of Northfield, Massachusetts. In other places, cities swell, factories roar, immigrants pour in. With the violent cult of Mormonism being founded in 1830 and the end times-obsessed Jehovah's Witnesses in 1870, faith feels thin, muddled and confusing to many in the country, loud and overbearing to others, even scary to some. Churches argue, preachers posture. The world spins faster every year. And here, in the noise and motion of it all, a shoemaker works. He did not arrive here by accident. Loss carved the early lines in his life. Instability taught him to move. Hardship trained him to endure. He learned early that nothing is guaranteed. Not family, not comfort, not time. So he works. He learns the trade. He learns how to sell. He learns how to speak plainly. He learns how to look people in the eye and ask for a decision. Shoes on the shelf, money in the till. No patience for drift. Yet something presses him. It's not ambition. It's not education. It's not approval. It's urgency. There's a weight he cannot shake. A sense that time matters, that people matter, that words, if spoken straight, can cut through confusion and land where they need to land, penetrating deep into the heart, something to do with the soul. He does not sound like a preacher. He doesn't act like one. He's rough, direct, sometimes careless. Critics will later say he butchers grammar. They will sneer at his lack of training. They will even call him crude. They're not wrong. But they will miss the whole point. Because while others sit in offices in handcrafted, high-backed mahogany chairs, crafting sentences like wordsmiths, this man watches faces. While others debate doctrine, he counts souls. While others protect tradition, he moves toward people who never darken church doors. The bench does not know any of this yet. The hammer keeps falling. Leather bends. Soles shape. Shoes leave the store and disappear into the busy city. And the man who made them starts speaking to customers about more than feet and fit. He asks questions that linger. He presses conversations past comfort. He invites, insists, challenges. Some listen, some laugh, some walk away, but he keeps going. This is not the beginning of success. It's the beginning of direction. Years from now, crowds will gather by the thousands. Cities will pause. Songs will thunder through halls. Newspapers will argue over his influence. Leaders will seek his counsel. Nations will hear his voice. But all of that stands downstream from this moment, from the bench, from the hammer, From a man with no platform and no safety net who believes with stubborn clarity that ordinary work can serve an extraordinary calling. His name is D.L. Moody, and before the world ever listened, he learned to work. Welcome to Church History Time. He was not born into momentum. He was born into interruption. Northfield, Massachusetts sits among hills and farms, quiet places where days repeat and futures look small. That is where D.L. Moody entered the world in 1837, the sixth of 9 children. The year he was born, the Great Panic of 1837 roared across America until the mid-1840s. It was a time when the banking system was brought to the edge of collapse, and poverty crowded the streets with desperate people just wanting to feed their families. His father, Edwin Moody, struggled to provide against the tide of destitution that ravaged the nation, but it finally claimed him too. Edwin died when Dwight was just 4 years old, and death did not arrive gently. It emptied the house of security. It stripped the family of income. It turned childhood into survival. His mother took boarders. She worked without pause, trying to scrape together just enough coin to keep the children from withering into skeletons. She prayed without ceremony. There was no time for fluffy Christianese. Faith was not theoretical in that house. It was functional, practical. You trusted God because there was no backup plan. And as Moody would learn later in life, when you have no backup plan, God works on your behalf. Dwight learned early that life does not wait for anyone. He learned how to move fast, how to adapt, how to push forward even when the path made no sense. He learned to accept responsibility before he was even ready for it. School did not reward him. Books did not open easily. He struggled with reading. Writing frustrated him. Precision felt out of reach. He would carry this insecurity for years. But he noticed something else: people. He watched how they spoke, how they listened, how tone mattered more than polish, how conviction carried weight when words stumbled. At 17, he left home, not to chase adventure, not to chase comfort. He barely knew what that word even meant. He was chasing cold, hard work. Boston pulled him in with its noise and promise. The city moved fast. Stores buzzed, streets crowded, opportunity lived behind counters and inside ledgers. Dwight arrived with almost nothing except a letter of introduction and a willingness to outwork anyone beside him. He went door to door asking anyone to give him a chance. But with a lot of businesses still recovering or not trusting it enough to risk the cost of any extra help, nobody would take him in. Finally, he went to his uncle, Samuel Holton, the owner of a shoe store, and asked him. Samuel said yes, and gave Dwight the not-so-glamorous but very practical position of selling shoes. And Dwight was relentless. He memorized prices, he learned inventory, he watched customers, he closed sales. He treated the work like a mission long before he even knew what his mission was. Samuel saw Dwight's drive, but he wanted to ensure that the young 17-year-old didn't find himself mixed up in mischief. A young man with a rough personality, his mother far away, and fresh money burning a hole in his pocket was a recipe for just that: mischief. So for Dwight to keep his job, there was one more line added to the job description: church attendance. It was not optional. So Dwight went. Not out of spiritual hunger, not even out of conviction. He went out of obligation. At first, the services bored him. Sermons drifted, language floated above his head. It felt distant and formal, built for people unlike him. It didn't sound practical and was too flowery for his taste. But one teacher noticed him: Edward Kimball. This Sunday school instructor knew exactly how to punch through that hard outer shell. He didn't preach at Dwight. That would just close him up more. He spoke to him like a father to a son, plainly, personally, directly. On April 21st, 1855, Kimball went looking for the now 18-year-old Dwight. He found him in his usual place in the shoe store. He stood among the shelves and spoke about Christ in words that made sense. No polish, no pressure, just urgency and care. And Dwight listened. Not because the words were perfect, but because they were real and thumped his heart like a hammer pounding a nail. Something shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but just enough to change his direction. He would later say that that day altered everything, though he could never fully explain exactly how. It wasn't long after that conversation that Dwight made the decision to make Jesus Lord of his life. And when D.L. Moody made a decision, he did not deviate from it unless the Lord himself commanded it. But it's important to note that while Dwight's heart was changed forever, he did not become suddenly miraculously eloquent. He did not become suddenly educated. He did not become soft and fluffy like so many would have expected. He became convicted. Conviction did not make him patient. It made him active. He began to speak to anyone who would listen. Co-workers, customers, strangers. He did not wait for permission. He didn't wait for training. He moved with even more urgency than he brought to selling shoes. This unsettled people. Church leaders worried. His grammar embarrassed them. His methods felt uncontrolled. He asked too much. He pushed too hard. He didn't know when to back off when things got tense and awkward. But Dwight was not measuring success by approval. He never had in anything else he had ever done. Why would he start now? He was measuring it by the response of the hearts he was trying to reach. Boston shaped him, but it also boxed him in. There were limits here. Walls he could feel but not name. The city gave him work and discipline, but it couldn't hold the scale of his restlessness. He didn't know where he was going next, but he knew that standing still was no longer an option. The boy shaped by loss had learned how to survive. The man taking shape was learning how to move. Before we move on, there's so much to the life of D.L. Moody that I can't get into in this documentary, and if you'd like to go deeper, my audiobook company, Living Audio, has produced 2 classic audiobooks about D.L. Moody, which is where a lot of this information is coming from. The first is simply called The Life of D.L. Moody, written by his son, Paul Dwight Moody, and Arthur Fitt, which was narrated by myself. And the other is D.L. Moody's own book, The Secret to Power and the Holy Spirit, which was narrated by one of our amazing narrators, Jay Tyler. These are both on Audible, and you can find the links to them in the description below. He went west because he couldn't stay put. Boston had taught him how to work. It had shown him how faith could speak plainly, but it also fenced him in. Too many rules, too many raised eyebrows, too many quiet ways of saying, slow down. So he didn't. He would always appreciate his uncle and Edward Kimball, but he followed the Lord now, and the Lord was telling him to go to Chicago. He thought to start his own shoe business and continue growing in earthly wealth. In 1855, Chicago was young, loud, growing fast, and unfinished. A city still deciding what it would become. That year, the larger beer riot took place over Sunday drinking restrictions and unfairly high license fees for distribution. This was the first major civil disturbance in that great city. Liquor licenses could cost up to $300, which was a year's wages for a modest family in those days, and this was imposed largely on the German immigrants, which caused quite the unrest. But D.L. Moody loved the rough and tumble culture. Mud streets, wooden buildings, smoke puffing in the air, opportunity stacked beside chaos. People arrived daily with nothing but hope and hunger. It suited him. D.L. Moody arrived with the same tools he always carried: drive, conviction, and no interest in waiting his turn. He started his new shoe business and quickly found success, but that was never the point. Work paid his rent. The city paid him with attention. Chicago's streets were crowded with people no one else was even attempting to reach. Immigrants, laborers, children who drifted instead of learned, families crushed by speed and poverty. Moody noticed them, and the heart of God for them grew in his chest. He knew he couldn't just let these multitudes walk by him without telling them about the one and only thing that mattered, King Jesus. And he acted. From 1857 to 1858, Dwight served as the volunteer janitor for the Young Men's Christian Association, better known as the YMCA. The leaders loved him so much that they asked him to become officially employed as their city missionary. He had already started a small Sunday school, but this lit a fire under him, so he tightened his grip on the plow and pushed even harder. He didn't start with sermons. He started with children. He gathered them wherever he could find them. Docks, alleys, vacant lots. He promised food. He promised stories. He promised the attention of a father figure. And then he taught. No structure, no approval, no building. Just voices and noise and bodies packed together. The Sunday school grew because it met people where they were. It didn't ask them to clean up first. It didn't wait for them to understand theology. It gave them something solid to hold on to in a city that shifted under their very feet. This made the local church leaders very nervous, but Moody ignored them. He rented rooms, then halls, then larger spaces. When doors closed, he found windows. When critics complained, he worked harder. He sought donations without shame and spent it without hesitation. If it fed people or taught them, it mattered. His sort of order followed need, not tradition. He built systems without calling them systems. Volunteers knew their jobs, classes ran on time, records were kept. Money was tracked. Moody treated ministry the way he treated business. Waste nothing. Move fast, fix problems immediately. Some called him reckless. They were wrong. He was focused. But Chicago was not kind. Winters cut hard. Summers stank. Disease spread fast. Poverty pressed in from every side, and Moody saw the cost of ignoring people up close. He did not romanticize suffering. He tried to outpace it. This was not revival yet. This was just the groundwork, brick by brick, child by child, night after night. He spoke often now, louder, sharper, still rough, still imperfect. But people listened because he spoke like a man who believed every word cost something. Chicago was now shaping him in the way Northfield and Boston never could. It taught him scale. It taught him urgency. It taught him that the work would never be finished, and it set the stage for what would come next, because the nation was about to be thrown into chaos. And when it did, Dwight was ready. The nation tore itself in half in 1861. States split, families split, churches split. Young men poured south and east in uniforms that barely fit, carrying rifles they barely knew how to use. By the time D.L. Moody was firmly rooted in Chicago, the Civil War had begun to drain the country of blood and certainty. And Chicago was no bystander. It was a rail hub, a supply center, a city humming with movement. Troops passed through constantly. Camps sprang up on the edges of town. Soldiers waited for orders, waited for transports, waited for news from home. And waiting is where the danger crept in. Boredom, drink, gambling, despair. Moody saw it all immediately, so he went out to them. Not with speeches, not with flags. He went with coffee. He opened makeshift tents and rooms near camps and depots, places where soldiers could sit, eat, talk, and breathe for a moment. The coffee was strong, the food was simple. The conversations went where they needed to go, which of course was Jesus. This was not official chaplaincy. This was not organized outreach. It was Moody doing what he always did, seeing a need, moving fast, and bringing Jesus along with him. He partnered with groups like the United States Christian Commission, which worked alongside the Union Army to provide spiritual care and basic supplies. But Moody never fit neatly into anyone's plan. He spoke in camps, hospitals, and open fields, sometimes to hundreds, sometimes to just a handful of men who might not survive the week. He would organize with the Chicago YMCA volunteers to go straight to the front lines and minister to the soldiers. They even served after the Battle of Shiloh. He saw horrible things, but he did not avoid the hard truths. Men everywhere asked about fear, about death, about guilt, and he answered them right back plainly. While politicians argued strategy and generals argued terrain, Moody dealt with what war always exposes first: the true nature of souls under pressure. In 1863, as the war ground on and casualties climbed, the country erupted in unrest far from the battlefield. That summer saw the New York City draft riots, where opposition to conscription exploded into days of violence. Immigrants were targeted, buildings burned. Federal troops fresh from Gettysburg were marched north to restore order. The nation was cracking from the inside. Moody watched all of it with the same conclusion he always reached. People were desperate and desperately needed Jesus, and desperation does not wait. The war sharpened him. He learned how to speak to men who had already seen death. He learned brevity. He learned gravity. He learned that comfort without honesty was useless. And he learned that moments mattered, because tomorrow was never guaranteed. When the war ended in 1865, the country staggered forward, changed forever. Hundreds of thousands were dead. Millions were wounded in ways no one couldn't even see. The optimism of the 1850s was gone, and Moody was different too. The war had burned all hesitation out of him. He returned to Chicago with deeper urgency, tougher skin, and a clearer sense of what delay cost, but not the deepest sense he would find. The work after the war would grow faster, louder, broader, but it was the camps, the wounded, and the waiting soldiers who taught him the greatest lesson first. Time does not slow down for anyone, and you do not always get a second chance to speak. And that lesson was about to be driven into his heart as he never imagined. By this time, Dwight was married to Emma Revel Moody, and they were ministering together, and they became close friends with another woman named Emma Dreyer. Emma Dreyer became a sort of right-hand woman to Dwight, and he saw incredible potential in her. The Lord had obviously gifted her with leadership ability, so he asked her to oversee a new ministry that would train women for ministry and missionary work. Emma Dreyer accepted the challenge, and that ministry began to grow with a powerhouse group of women, bringing countless people to the Lord all over the world. And it seemed like everything was finally going well for Moody's ministry, family, and even for Chicago. But that was all about to change. On October 8th, 1871, Moody preached what he called a soft ending. He didn't urge people to make Jesus Lord enough, didn't press the importance of it enough. That was the mistake. He spoke to a full church in Chicago and closed with an invitation delayed. It wasn't now, not today. He told the crowd to think it over. Come back next week, ready to make a decision. But most of them never got that chance. That night, not long after those soft words of his sermon left his lips, fire broke loose in the city. Wind drove it hard and fast. Wood-bed streets ignited like tinder. Buildings vanished in minutes. Blocks collapsed into ash. The heat bent iron. The sky turned red. People ran with whatever they could carry. Most ran with nothing. And by morning, Chicago lay broken. Homes gone. Churches gone. Schools gone. and Moody's work went with them. The buildings that he had fought for, the rooms he had rented, the classes he organized, reduced to smoke. Years erased in hours. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 destroyed over 17,000 buildings, left over 100,000 people homeless, and left over 3 square miles in ashes. Moody walked through the ruins, stunned. This was not loss at a distance. It stood in front of him. Blackened streets, charred beams, people wandering with blank faces and burned hands. The city he poured himself into had been stripped bare, and so had he. That last sermon haunted him. He would later say that he never again ended a message without calling for immediate response. The fire taught him that time is a lie that people tell themselves. Tomorrow is not promised. Delay costs lives. This was not some new theology. It was experience. The fire could have ended him, and it did end many others. No money, no buildings, no stability. Exhaustion layered on shock. But Moody did not retreat. He moved toward the wreckage like any good minister would. Relief came first. Food, shelter, aid. Moody worked beside anyone willing. He didn't care who got credit. He didn't slow down to mourn what was lost. The living mattered more than the ruins. And something changed within him. Before the fire, he built fast. After the fire, he built deep. He saw that crowds were not enough. Emotion was not enough. Momentum without roots burns out. If the work was going to last, it needed structure strong enough to survive any disaster. So he rebuilt with intent. Training was what mattered now. Organization mattered. Multiplication mattered. Support mattered. He gathered people capable and trusted them. He delegated. He planned. He stopped trying to carry everything on his own broad shoulders. His preaching sharpened yet again to a fine point. Still plain, still blunt, still cutting. But now it was marked by an urgency that never let go. There were no more soft endings, no more safe delays. He spoke like a man who had watched a city vanish overnight. The fire did not make him famous. It made him serious. From this point on, his work would stretch far beyond Chicago. The scope widened. His voice carried further. What began in shoe stores and slums was about to move onto national and then global ground. But the lesson of the fire always stayed with him. Everything can burn. Only what's rooted holds. The fire stripped him down, but what rose from the ashes was stronger. He spoke as if the very room he stood in could be burnt to ash in the morning, and people listened. Word spread. First across Chicago, then beyond it. Churches asked him to come speak. Cities asked him to stay longer. Halls filled. Streets clogged. The crowds were not polite. They were restless. They were working people. They were skeptics. They were wounded, and they were bored. They were looking for purpose. And Moody was not softening any edges for them. In June of 1872, he journeyed to the United Kingdom for revival meetings that would change everything. The new anointing on his life sliced through hard hearts like a hypodermic needle through flesh. He spoke like a man addressing equals. There were no robes, there was no pretense, there was no performance. He used short, strong sentences and examples the common man could understand. He aimed for the will, the heart, not just the intellect. He demanded decisions. Some bristled, but many returned. But something was missing. The words landed, but the places he preached in felt heavy. The meetings worked. Yes, there was conviction. Yes, there were people giving their lives to the Lord, but his pounding words needed something not to soften the blow, but to give hope for the future. If someone received the Lord and were forgiven, but had no way to express that thankfulness and give glory to God, they still left the meetings heavy-hearted and half-baked. So the meetings felt strained. Moody felt it. He could stir minds, But he needed help stirring hearts. Then he heard the singing. Ira D. Sankey did not preach. He sang. He worshiped. There was no choir loft, no theatrics, just a clear voice and simple melodies. The songs carried truth without argument. They moved people before Moody could ever even open his mouth. The partnership clicked immediately. Moody did the preaching. Sankey worshiped. Word and music locked together. Neither tried to steal the stage. Each reinforced the other. Where Moody pressed hard, Sankey softened. Where emotions swelled, clarity followed. This changed the whole mood of the meetings. The atmosphere went from constant, relentless fire and brimstone and nothing but white-hot, righteous terror to a spirit of revival. Crowds stayed longer. Silence deepened. Decisions came faster. People wept without being pushed. The songs lingered long after the sermons ended. Another thing that set Moody and Sankey apart were the fact that they didn't stick to one denomination or have loyalty to any particular group of people. Being non-denominational was revolutionary at that time, and many saw it as an insult. They called the whole thing manipulation. They called it spectacle. They said it lacked dignity. They said it felt modern, which was not a compliment. Moody ignored them. He measured fruit, not the voices of others, and the reach expanded. He crossed the Atlantic with no guarantee of success. British churches were cautious. They were suspicious of American style, wary of emotional appeal. If you want a deeper understanding of how preaching styles had dramatically changed during that time, make sure to watch my video on how George Whitefield changed church forever. Moody arrived with his rough grammar, and Sankey with his plain but powerful songs. It really should not have worked, but it did. Factories shut down to attend meetings. Churches overflowed. Newspapers argued over him. Some praised, some mocked. All paid attention. The crowds were larger than anything he had seen before, up to 20,000 people in one meeting. But Moody did not adjust his message. He just adjusted the scale. What once worked in alleys and rented halls now thundered through massive spaces. The same urgency, the same demand, the same insistence that delay was dangerous. This was no longer local work, it was a movement. And Moody felt the weight of it. He pushed harder, traveled more, slept less, ate poorly, rested rarely. He believed the time was short and the work was enormous. The thought of slowing down felt irresponsible. His voice had found its reach, and the cost of that reach was just beginning to show. Crowds fade. One man may die and be forgotten, but ministries, those can remain. Strong discipleship grows thick, deep roots that can bring generations to Christ. Moody knew this because he had watched buildings burn and movements scatter. In order to multiply the message after him, he needed hands trained to carry it. So he turned from events to infrastructure. He started training people who would never hold a pulpit. He trained teachers, mission workers, organizers, men and women who understood Scripture and the heart of Jesus and could speak it plainly in the streets, schools, and foreign ports. No polish or fluff required, just clarity. And the Moody Bible Institute grew out of that vision. It was practical to the bone. No academic vanity, no long detours. Students learned the Bible, how to teach it, and how to live it under pressure. Moody wanted workers ready, not impressed, and at the same time, he returned to Northfield. The quiet hills where he grew up became a gathering place. Conferences brought leaders, teachers, and skeptics into long days of teaching and prayer. No theatrics, no spectacle, just sustained focus. Northfield was slower than the revival halls, and that was the point. Here, ideas were tested, doctrine sharpened, young leaders learned restraint as well as Holy Ghost fire. Moody believed passion without grounding collapsed. He had seen it. He still traveled, relentlessly, but now the travel fed something larger than himself. He invested in others. He trusted teams. He stepped back when needed, though it never came easily to him. And his health paid the price. The body that carried him across oceans began to fail. Pain lingered. Fatigue deepened. Doctors warned him, and his friends urged rest, and he ignored most of them. Not out of pride. It was out of his sense of urgency. He believed the clock was running, that the world did not slow down for tired men. So he worked as long as he could still stand. Near the end, crowds mattered less to him than continuity. He spoke more about faithfulness than success, more about obedience than results. The man who once chased every open door now chose very carefully which ones he walked through. When he died unexpectedly in 1899 at 62, the shock spread fast, but the work did not stop. Students were still taught, teachers trained, missionaries went, churches continued. The systems held because they were built to hold. The shoemaker did not leave behind a single monument to himself. He left behind a workforce for Jesus. And that is how the story closes where it began. A man who learned to work with his hands and never stopped. His work never slowed. His body did. His last days were quiet. There were no crowds, no hymns, no platform. When he died, churches filled, newspapers wrote, leaders spoke. The scale of his influence came into focus really only after his voice was gone. D.L. Moody's ministry is estimated to have brought around 1 million souls to Christ in his lifetime, not counting the millions more that were reached through the people he trained, pushed, discipled, and sent out all over the world. He left behind several training schools, including the Northfield Seminary for Young Women, the College Student Summer School, the Student Volunteer Movement for Foreign Missions, which sent out over 5,000 missionaries, and of course, most famous of all, Moody Bible Institute, which continues discipling people to this very day. If you enjoyed this, you'll want to watch my video on the unexplainable children's revival of 1707. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.